Welcome to a brand new episode of the Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves. Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into some really fresh regulatory waters today, coming straight out of the Abu Dhabi global market, the ADGM. Our source stack is, well, it's pretty direct. Consultation paper number 11 of 2025. This is from the ADGM Registration Authority, the RA, and it just dropped on October 9th.
Yeah, and this document, it's a massive signal, I think, about where the ADGM is heading when it comes to sort of short-term operations.
Absolutely. It's quite significant.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. This paper proposes some really foundational amendments to the ADGM's commercial permits framework. And look, if you are licensed in the ADGM, or maybe you consult for firms operating there, or heck, if you even just plan to run a temporary promotional stand sometime soon, this information isn't just relevant, it feels immediately actionable, wouldn't you say? I would, yes, indeed. This move really goes far beyond just, routine updates. What we're seeing here is the Registration Authority, the RA, formalizing processes that historically might have existed in a bit of a regulatory gray area. And the explicit goal here, they state it quite clearly, is to enhance consumer protection and enforce comprehensive transparency for pretty much all short-term activities within the free zone. To do this, the RA is introducing 4 new, quite crucial sets of subordinate rules. These all fall under the existing Commercial Permits Regulations 2024.
Right, the 2024 regs. And those 4 new rules, which we'll be getting into today, are the temporary commercial rules, temporary activity rules, the sales and promotions rules, and of course the necessary fees rules that put a price tag on all of it.
Exactly. And maybe let's establish the context first, the why behind the ADGM deciding to sort of tighten this net right now.
Good idea.
The current environment, it seems, required much greater clarity regarding how an entity, maybe one not even licensed within the ADGM, could legitimately get, renew, and maintain permits for these short-term activities. And this covers quite a range, everything from a quick pop-up shop to temporary sales events, even things like prize draws.
Okay.
The paper explicitly aims to make sure these, and they call them deviations from standard business practice.
Ah, interesting phrasing.
It is, isn't it? To ensure these deviations are not only lawful, but are standardized. The goal is to rigorously uphold market integrity.
That distinction, regulating deviations from standard practice, that really feels key. It signals the RA's intent to police temporary marketing, maybe just as strictly as they police, permanent operations.
Precisely.
So who needs to be paying, immediate attention to this?
Well, the proposals are targeted squarely at all licensed persons currently in ADGM, their directors, officers, and certainly their advisors. This really includes any entity that holds a commercial license. Doesn't matter if it's through the ADGM registrar or maybe an onshore governmental entity if they plan to operate even temporarily within the free zone.
Right. And here's where it gets, I think, really interesting, especially given the speed the ADGM's regulatory engine often moves at. The deadline for providing written feedback on these proposals is October 30th, 2025.
Yeah.
That is a very tight window, isn't it?
It is extremely tight.
It really emphasizes that the RA sees these amendments as urgent and perhaps is genuinely seeking some critical input before finalizing the rule.
Absolutely. And that urgency means we absolutely must include a necessary caution here.
Okay.
While we're diving deep into these proposed changes today, no one should act on them just yet. Not until the final subordinate rules and the accompanying guidance are formally published by the RA. Remember, this current document is still a proposal. It's not the final law.
Good point. Crucial reminder. Okay, let's start with the foundation then. The Temporary Commercial Permit, or TCP. I got to think of this as the pop-up shop license. What's its core function?
Well, the TCP basically grants an entity the right to operate commercially within the ADGM's boundaries. And this is key only for a specific limited time. It's capped at a maximum of 12 months. This seems aimed at, market testing maybe, or short-term operations that don't yet quite warrant a full permanent ADGM license.
Okay, that makes sense. And what are the primary requirements for actually securing one of these TCPs? I know one requirement really stands out as a potentially critical operational hurdle.
Yes, you're right. First, the applicant has to already hold a valid commercial license. This could be an onshore one from elsewhere in the UAE or one issued by the ADGM registrar itself.
Right.
Second, naturally, they have to complete the specific prescribed application form. But the third requirement, and this is the one that's operationally most significant, is proof of physical presence authorization. They must provide either a no objection letter an NOC issued by the ADGM premises landlord.
Ah, the landlord.
Exactly. Or, alternatively, a valid lease agreement for the actual space they intend to occupy within the ADGM.
That landlord letter requirement, that's fascinating. Because it effectively gives the physical premises owner a kind of VO, or at least a mandatory sign-off on these temporary operations, doesn't it?
It certainly seems to.
It immediately connects that temporary business activity to the physical accountability of the space itself.
Exactly. And if we connect this now to the bigger picture, especially regarding duration, the structure becomes even clearer. As I mentioned, the maximum duration is 12 months, but perhaps the most crucial detail here is this. TCPs are explicitly designated as non-renewable.
Non-renewable. Wow. Okay, that's a massive regulatory intent signal right there. Why do you think the RA is making that rule so explicit?
Well, it strongly suggests the RA wants to prevent what you might call permatemp businesses setting up shop indefinitely under a temporary framework.
Right, business is just renewing forever.
Precisely. If an entity successfully operates for a full 12 months, the underlying regulatory assumption seems to be that they've established a viable, potentially long-term presence. And if that's the case, they should now really transition to obtaining a full ADGM commercial license.
So the non-renewability rule acts as a kind of mandatory conversion trigger.
That's how I read it, yes. Either cease operations or upgrade your licensing status. And they're segmenting the validity periods quite precisely, too. There's a weekly option, capped at 1 month total,
Okay.
then 3 months, 6 months, and the full 12 months.
And the financial structure, the fees for these TCPs, that seems to support that interpretation too, right? I noticed something, well, fascinating in the fees rules for the TCPs. The longer permits seem to be linearly priced.
Yes, that's a keen observation. That linear scaling effectively removes any financial penalty for committing to a longer-term trial period, if you like. The weekly permit is set at 250 AED, the 3-month permit is 3,000 AED, the 6-month is 6,000 AED, and the full 12-month permit costs 12,000 AED.
So 11,000 AED per month for the longer terms.
Exactly. It simplifies budgeting and clearly tells a business, look, we aren't penalizing you financially for choosing the most stable temporary option available under this particular permit type.
I think businesses will probably appreciate that clarity. But conversely, what happens if an entity decides to just, bypass the structure entirely? Say they set up a 3-month pop-up without getting a TCP first.
Well, the paper is quite explicit on that. Failing to obtain a TCP before conducting temporary commercial activity within the ADGM is considered a contravention under these new proposals, and that will certainly lead to regulatory penalties. The RI is clearly ensuring this segment of the market is no longer, let's say, unregulated.
Right, makes sense. So if the TCP regulates who operates temporarily, the next section we need to look at the temporary activity permit, or TIP seems to regulate what they're actually doing, right? It feels like a permit built around the activity itself, not necessarily the commercial entity running it.
That's a perfect distinction, I think. Think of it this way. The TCP might allow a cafe, say, to rent a space for 3 months.
Okay.
The TPay, then, is the permit needed for that cafe to host a specific one-off poetry reading, maybe, or perhaps a 2-day professional seminar within that space. So the TP covers specific isolated activities, and they're categorized quite clearly as events like trainings, seminars, entertainment, performances, singers, photography, and speakers.
Okay, different categories. So who is actually eligible to apply for one of these TTPs, given that it's so activity-focused?
Well, there seem to be 2 main pathways, ensuring pretty tight control. The applicant must either already hold a full ADGM commercial license, or they must hold an onshore commercial license plus a valid ADGM temporary commercial permit, the TCP we just discussed.
Ah, so that TCP is often a prerequisite.
It appears so, yes.
Yeah.
It essentially means if you're coming from outside the ADGM jurisdiction just to host a specific event, you generally need to secure your temporary commercial presence permit first, the TCP, before you can apply for the activity permit, the TAP.
Interesting layering. The RA seems extremely granular about the duration allowed for these TAPs, too. It really shows they've tried to tailor the rules to the specific nature of each activity. What stands out in those validity periods?
Yes, the durations are highly specific. For instance, for events and entertainment activities, the validity starts at 1 month, but it's capped at a maximum of 3 months.
Okay.
Speakers, on the other hand, seem limited to just a 1-month validity period.
Shorter.
And the shortest activity permit seems to be for photography. That one can start at just a single day, though it's capped at 1 month maximum. which I suppose acknowledges that a professional photo shoot is often inherently a very short, contained kind of activity.
Yeah, that makes practical sense.
Uh,
Okay, let's talk about the TA fees then. I was a bit surprised by the differentiation here. Why do you think entertainment and speakers are priced significantly higher than the other categories like events and photography?
That's a key analytical point, isn't it? You're right, events and photography permits are set at 500 AED each. However, entertainment and speakers jump right up to 1,500 AED, that's 3 times the cost.
Yeah.
This most likely reflects a regulatory assessment of potentially increased risk or perhaps complexity associated with things like public performances or high-profile speaking engagements. I mean, entertainment often involves things like crowd management, maybe ticketing, external coordination, while speakers might involve content that requires potentially closer scrutiny from the authorities.
Okay.
So the fee difference probably reflects the perceived regulatory overhead needed for the approval process and maybe ongoing supervision for those types of activities.
That makes sense. So it's kind of a risk-based pricing model for the activities themselves. Okay, now let's move to the third major category. The Sales and Promotions Permit, the SPP. This one feels like it directly regulates the consumer-facing marketing actions.
It does, and this represents, I think, a massive shift toward even greater consumer protection within the ADGM ecosystem. The SPP clarifies exactly what constitutes a sale or a promotion in the eyes of the RA, and it mandates that either a full licensed person or even a TCP holder must obtain the specific permit to carry out certain limited-time commercial activities. Essentially, it puts all promotional campaigns under the explicit purview and control of the RA.
Right. And to make this really concrete for, for you listening, what are some of the specific examples of activities that will absolutely require an SBP under these proposals?
The consultation paper lists quite comprehensive examples, seemingly trying to ensure no loopholes remain. This covers basically all forms of discounts. They explicitly mention clearance discounts and temporary sales discounts.
Okay.
It also covers promotions, such as offering instant prizes or conducting prize draws. And then there are specific physical marketing activities like product launches and also setting up dedicated promotional stands within the ADGM.
So quite a wide net for marketing activities. How long are businesses allowed to run these specific promotions? Do the caps on duration vary as much as they did for the TAPs?
They vary slightly, but perhaps less dramatically. Most of the common activities, things like the various discounts, instant prizes, prize draws, those are generally set for a 1-month duration, capped at a maximum of 3 months.
Okay, 1 to 3 months typically.
Yes. Product launches seem a bit shorter, limited to just a 1-month cap total. Interestingly, though, the promotional stand activity actually has the longest potential runway. It starts at 1 month, but it's capped way out at 12 months.
12 months for a promotional stand.
Yes, which likely allows businesses perhaps using a physical space for long-term branding visibility, maybe without necessarily conducting full commercial transactions from that stand continuously.
Interesting allowance there. Okay, let's discuss the fees rules for these SPPs. I have to say, I find this particular regulatory choice quite intriguing.
Oh, how so?
Well, unlike the risk-tiered TAP fees we just talked about, the SPP fees seem to be entirely consistent across the board.
Yes. You're right to highlight that. It is noteworthy. While, a prize draw potentially carries quite high financial risk and maybe significant compliance overhead.
Right, compared to a simple discount.
Exactly. Yet, every single type of sales and promotions permit, whether it's for a clearance discount, an instant prize promotion, or even those detailed product launch categories they mentioned, like sampling versus special events, every single one is uniformly priced at 1,000 AED.
One flat fee. Does that signal, maybe, that the RA is prioritizing administrative simplicity over, say, a risk-adjusted revenue model when it comes to these promotional activities? I mean, given the potentially vast difference in consumer impact between maybe a simple 10% discount and a multi-million dirham prize draw, I might have expected greater fee differentiation there.
It certainly suggests simplicity as a high priority, doesn't it? By setting a relatively low standard fee of 1,000 AED, the RA effectively ensures that the cost itself isn't likely to be a major barrier to compliance. The regulatory focus seems to be more on mandating the permit application itself. Why? So they can scrutinize the terms and conditions, check the details, and ensure consumer transparency is maintained.
So the goal is oversight, not revenue.
It appears that way, yes. Rather than using the fee itself as maybe a deterrent or a significant revenue source from promotions, compliance and notification seem to be the primary objectives here, getting visibility into all promotional activity. So, okay, let's step back. what does this entire document, this consultation paper, ultimately mean for the whole ADGM ecosystem? Well, the paper really confirms a definitive regulatory evolution, I believe. The ADGM is moving decisively toward a mandatory, much more granular permit system, one that aims to regulate pretty much every type of short-term operations, specific event, and promotional marketing activity happening within its borders. And the motivation seems clearly twofold. First, to provide much-needed regulatory certainty for legitimate market entrants wanting to test the waters, but also, simultaneously, ensuring every single activity upholds market integrity and, crucially, protects consumers. This is absolutely vital information for anyone currently operating in, or even just considering a temporary presence of any kind within the ADGM boundaries.
Absolutely. We've seen how the RA is systematically closing potential loopholes across commercial presence with the TCP, specific activities with the TTP, and now consumer promotions with the SBP. But the devil, as they say, often lies in the operational friction, doesn't it?
Almost always.
So considering that all three of these permit types, TCP, TP, and SPP, are explicitly stated as not renewable,
Non-renewable.
and remembering that the TCP requires that potentially tricky landlord no objection letter, what implications might this specific requirement have on businesses that perhaps rely on running frequent, maybe rotating short-term activities throughout the year? That operational challenge, the need for potentially fresh paperwork and new landlord approval every single time, that seems like a key practical takeaway for you, the listener, to maybe mull over as you consider preparing your feedback for the RA before that October 30th deadline. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. This has been a brand new episode of The Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves.